talked
I
about a
want
few
to
of
ask you. Let me ask
Sure.
you about the intergenerational thing. 'Cause
Okay. The
yeah,
intergenerational
yeah,
thing.
the
Okay.
that because that's a big deal.
It
Because
is a huge deal.
we're separating. Oh, boomers are moving
Right.
out.
They're
You have
retiring.
the Gen X.
Right.
You have millennials, and now we have the Gen Z. So
Right.
how are you sort of navigating those waters, those generational waters in terms of dealing with organizations?
I have
Because
some
you really,
opinions on
yes,
this.
and I'm glad you mentioned that because I have some thoughts on that too. But I'm curious to hear
It
yours.
was interesting. I was speaking to someone a couple of weeks ago, and everyone's gotten in the habit of bashing the millennials. And I'm like, hey, by the way, the millennials are 40. They're in charge of people now. These are not children in car seats. They're amazing human beings. And people have just dug into it. And they're like, well, they're coming out of college. And I'm like, well, no, actually, they're not. Gen Z's coming out of college.
Right.
And I think what I'm finding is that it's not a maturity issue. People talk about a maturity issue. It's a learning issue. And, students that go through my effective teams class are mostly seniors. But they're like, I wish this had been my very first class. I wish before I even started college, we'd had this talk about productivity and cohesion and strengths on a team and disruptive behaviors. So it's teachable, right? It's teachable if you're 60, it's teachable if you're 50, it's teachable if you're 40. And with the groups that I work with, that's what they're interested in. And they find when they use good practices for how people work together, it doesn't matter how old the people are. So the intergenerational thing doesn't have to be what we turn it into,
Yep.
but it does involve mutual respect.
Yeah. So I got some feedback because I know that's one of the things that you talk about. Actually, on the last podcast, I was like, we need feedback, but we also need feed forward.
Oh, I love that term.
And so, so I went and spoke, and I kept talking about millennials. And so on the evaluations, one of the guys, he said, they're still boomers, in out here working.
Yeah.
And he put that on there. I was like, man, that's good. And, we need to be cognizant
Of the
that.
bias.
Yeah, of the biases that we had. Me talking about that, and I was like, man, we need to be very careful about, lumping people into certain generations. Yeah, are there certain things that are different? But at the end of the day, people are people, human beings, like you were just talking about with the soft skills things. And I was like, man, workers are workers.
Right.
At the end of the day, the workforce is the workforce.
Right.
So there's some really fundamental things when you just come to talk about being an employee, a manager, and being a leadership, that it doesn't matter what generation you in. So I really like
It
that.
doesn't.
Yeah.
Right. Like you have boomers that are amazing, courageous, resilient. They're so relevant. And one of the things the research shows in the Dare to Lead work is the fear of being irrelevant. So if I'm older and I worry that I can't keep up, or if I'm younger and I worry I won't be accepted, that fear of irrelevance really drives some super problematic behaviors. And then, like I'm Gen X, and they say we're the ones that don't care. That we're just sitting around with a
Gen
glass
X
of
too,
wine
yeah.
waiting for the boomers to retire.
Yeah.
And that's not true either. I had a student a couple of semesters ago, and she's like, Professor Clark, you're one of us. You're a millennial, except you have disposable income. And I was like, okay, I'll take that. I was like, that's the best description ever.
Yeah.
But what she meant is that I got them, right? And they didn't feel completely separated from me because of the age difference.
I feel like our generation understand boomers and we understand millennials.
Right. I think we're the supreme mediators.
We are definitely mediators. But one of the things that I always think that's really important is the boomers have wisdom. And the millennials, they have, the tech savvy. So let's combine them together and let us, the Gen X, be in the middle. It's like, yes, we brought y'all together because you can learn from each other, and I think that has happened. One of the things that I am seeing that I think is really good is that we are taking those who have been in the workforce a while, and having them mentor those. Because what I know millennials do want, they want mentorships. They want to be coached. They want to feel like, you know what, I have a career path and I want to develop and I want to have meaning. But if you get those individuals who's been in the workforce for a while,
Right.
and really connect them with those millennials who say, you know what, I want somebody to mentor me and coach me. That's what I'm seeing. And so I think we need to do more of that. Have that conversation and quit making it a division. Like, oh,
Agreed.
you're a boomer, you're a millennial, Gen X, and I know what it is. At the end of the day, we all have fundamental things that we all want as employees and managers and in leadership. So
I just think you have to be careful with it, right? You know, I've seen people mentor, and mentoring should be a lot more listening than talking, right?
absolutely,
So I don't want to see people mentoring so I can straighten you out, you
yeah,
poor millennial or Gen Z. And I think the concept that all of the wisdom lies with older people leads us down a bad path. I think for a lot of places, millennials are our social conscience, right? Millennials were the one having the conversations
yeah,
around intersectionality, and they're bringing this to the table. And I think a lot of why people downplay it is that it makes them uncomfortable.
yeah.
And in that case, we need their voices desperately.